Welcome to Spruce Grove Alliance Church, your home.
Today, we're going to pause our famous Last Word series that Pastor Karen so excellently launched us with last week, this series that we're leading up to Easter. And we're going to do something special. Now, you might remember that we sent 5 people from SGAC on a missions trip to visit A and J on this place that we call Soli Island. They were there for 2 weeks, and then they joined myself and my wife in Thailand, where they had the first ever global gathering of international workers that the Alliance Canada sends out across the world. There's 200 of them that Alliance Canada, there's 440 churches across Canada, there's 136 in Alberta, and from those 440 churches from across Canada, we sent 200 international workers overseas, and this was the very first time that they assembled them in one place to come together for teaching and for fellowship and for worship and just updates of what God was doing. And so it was an amazing time. So today, through jet-lagged hearts and minds and bodies, because it was like 13 hours time difference, I think, 12 or 13, I don't know what it was. It's just the other side of the planet. We are going to share with you some of the things that God is doing around the world and how this trip has impacted us greatly. But before we do that, I want to set the stage. We are part, and you are sitting in this church called a Christian Missionary and Alliance denomination. And at the heart and at the history of Christian Missionary Alliance is to take the gospel where it has never gone before. If you know the whole history of Christian Missionary Alliance, long before we were around on this planet, they were started as a mission organization that came along and aligned themselves with churches, and then they built churches, and so the government came to them, this is really condensed history, and said, you need to choose. Are you a mission organization or are you a denomination? So that we're a denomination, but at the heart of our denomination is to take the gospel to the least reached people of the world. And A.B. Simpson, who is our founder of the denomination, put it this way. He says, our movement stands for a commitment to reach the most neglected field, to avoid the beaten tracks of other labors, to press on to the regions beyond, to preach the gospel where Christ has never been named. And so we have reframed that now thinking about our global missions initiatives at CMA Canada, and we call it the hard and the dark places. We are called to the hard places and the dark places. It means it's hard to live there. There's probably poverty, maybe some violence, not access to health care, the government instability, those hard places on this earth, but also dark, which means that in order for CMA to want to go send new missionaries or international workers, that's what we call it now, international workers, they have to be less than 2% of the population that calls themselves Christian. So it's a hard place and it is a dark place. And our strategy is threefold. We want to plant churches, church development, but there's no sense just giving them the bread of life unless we give them bread. And so we have part of social relief and then what we call marketplace ministry. And we have to find ways to get into these countries through creative ways. Listen to these crazy stats. Everyone say 1.7. 1.7% of all the money from North American Christian churches, from all denominations, not just Alliance, all North American Christian churches, when they give to global ministries, 1.7% of it goes to the hard and dark places, the least reached place. But yet, the denomination that you are part of, that you are sitting in the church, the Christian Missionary Alliance, 84% of our initiatives overseas goes to that 1.7%. Okay? We have 200 workers. And if you've been in church, you've heard this. If you've never been in church, you've never heard of this thing called the 1040 window. That's just a longitudinal, latitudinal. If you remember geography from junior high, some of you don't want to remember it, but that's the window. In that window are the least reached people groups of the world, right there. That's a 1040 window. Let me zoom in there. We were in the 1040 window, okay? That is where most of the least reached people, those are the hard and the dark places. That's where almost all of our 200 workers that we send from Canada are serving in that places. And so They have to sometimes gain access into these countries in creative ways. We call it creative access. They have to go in, they can't show up in an Islamic state and say, "Hi, I am a missionary that represents Jesus, and I am going to tell you the way, the truth, and the life." And they don't go, "Well, thank you. That's exactly what we're looking for. Come on in. We'll help you." That doesn't work that way, okay? I'm being facetious, but our world isn't the world. Canada isn't the world. And so they have to find ways to access these countries, to find a different job on the side. In fact, you might wonder why we call it A and J. We don't give their names because this is online, and we don't want to compromise. As you're going to hear today, some of the hostility that they face on that island, we don't want to compromise them. And I'm going to say this, but I'm going to show you a slide, but our online people are not going to see this. Okay, do you see that? We're going to call it Soli, okay? Because we don't want to compromise some of the work that's going on there, because they're doing amazing things for the work of God in this 1040 window. And so when we were at this global assembly with almost all the 200 workers, we had blue lanyards and we had red lanyards. And they told us, they said, if you see any red lanyards, that means no pictures, no video. And sometimes they would stand up on stage during one of these sessions and they would tell a story and they would say explicitly, no pictures, no video. If you are not here in this room today, you will never hear this story of what God is doing in one of those windows, those 1040 windows, in one of those countries in those 1040 windows. And so today you're going to hear about that. I hope I've set the stage well. We were in that 1040 window right there. The least reached parts of the world. And so I'm going to ask our team to come. They're going to set up stools here. And we've broken our discussion into 3 sections. We're going to talk about our culture shock that we experienced, some of them. We're going to talk about the mission and the work that is happening on Soli Island. And then we're going to talk about the deep personal spiritual impact that this has had upon their lives. And so you're gonna hear about from me every Sunday. So I'm going to speak very little. I'm just going to facilitate a conversation. You'll have weeks and months from here to hear all about what I've learned on this trip. But we want you to hear from them this morning. We have Beverly, we have Corey, we have Camille and Rob, and we have Jay here in the middle, who is our team leader. And you'll notice as well that we all have T-shirts that we got at our global assembly, where it has that prayer from our Alliance denomination on back here. So without further ado, I want to show you a quote that kind of sparked our conversation when we were debriefing in Thailand. "Traveling abroad is a continuous exercise in the discovery of your own ignorance." If you've traveled abroad, you know that. And some have even said it this way, that when you go and you visit these other places and you see billions and billions and billions and billions of people that live very different from you, you come to the realization that my world is not the world. My frame of reference and all the things that I get worked up on, my thing is not how most of the world functions, and especially in Canada with only our 40 million people, and there's billions and billions of people out there. And so we're going to start talking here, and as we go through these 3 sections, we're going to talk about culture shock, and then the mission, and then the personal spiritual impact. You're going to see pictures cycling in the background that kind of give you a frame of reference for what we're talking about. So let me ask the team here. Where were some of those my world or not the world? Where were some of those things that you experienced where you realized, I'm not in Canada anymore? When we share just a few of those.
For me, it was the call to prayer every morning at 4:30. It was loud, and sometimes the volume would go up and then down again. This happened 5 times per day at different times, and where there were...
So you're talking about the Muslim call to prayer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That was loud all throughout the community, and it was on speakerphones.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in? Yep.
For me, it was, if you haven't experienced jet lag, I tell you what, it is real. From the very start, it was definitely God teaching me some patience. Our flights were canceled, delayed, and messed up. But we just persevered and made it all happen, even though we had to spend a night in Vancouver. And humility for me. I really needed to be humbled. I have so much living here in Canada, the financial stability, a roof over my head, food on the table, and a warm bed every night, which all can be taken for granted. Even the washcloth in my bathroom. Boy, did I miss my washcloth. They don't have such a thing over there. It was humid, we were showering 2 or 3 times a day, but thanks to our IWs, they lent us some washcloths. But despite my own humbling, I was astonished to witness some of the fancy homes, the government buildings, and the banks, next to a row of dilapidated little shacks with tarped roofs surrounded by garbage, lots of garbage, and smells I'll remember forever. But the locals and the kids are happy. They're smiley, they greeted us, they waved. Their focus is family and relationships, just being together, surrounded by many of their people. That's humility and community. We could all learn a lot. If I was able to redo one cultural experience, I would have learned the language more so I could communicate with them and have deeper conversations. They are wealthier people than we would ever realize.
Wealthy in relationship, eh? Go, Jay.
You know, for me, I was greatly impressed in the way people care for one another. With a city as densely populated as the one we were in, I never saw a person begging on the street. In fact, I never saw a homeless encampment or a homeless person. It seems to me that people look out for each other. And I had to ask, where does somebody go if they need somewhere to sleep? And this is where we discovered that the Muslim mosque is open 24 hours a day. If people need somewhere to rest, people need somewhere to sleep, they're welcome there anytime they want. This got me thinking, what if the North American church were to do the same thing?
Any other cultural stuff you want to share, Camille?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the extreme shock of the heat and the humidity. For all the curly girls out there, whew, it was an eye-opener. The heat was so intense, it was like you were wearing a wet blanket on your body at all times a day. And the humidity was 100% most days. And so you would wake up in your air-conditioned room, which got it to a balmy 26. And then you would walk outside and you would immediately be sweating. And for us being in the country for women, we had to be fully covered. And so we were constantly sweating in places where you didn't think you could sweat. It was palpable. And the relief didn't come in the evening. So you were constantly trying to stay on mission in your mind when your body was constantly overheating. And that was a huge culture shock.
Yeah, I think for me, part of it was a multi-sensory kind of overload. It was what you could see would be the garbage in the street. You could see the roads flooded with scooters and kind of all kinds of SUVs and vans, but it wasn't like the road rage we have here. It was the bigger the truck or the bigger the vehicle, the more right-of-way you had. So it was kind of a right-of-way, W-E-I-G-H. So the bigger you were, the more you could take up of the lane or both lanes or all 3 lanes. And everyone just kind of zoomed in and out from each other. And that was kind of the visual. But then that kind of the smell part of it was there's no recycling program. There's no garbage pickup. It's just in the gutter, in the ditch, and then regularly burning when you had too much of it. So that overwhelming heat and humidity that Camille was talking about was amplified by that burning garbage constantly because it's not a priority. It's not something that they have that social infrastructure to set up that they can just collect the garbage and make it look in all these neat gated communities. So that was like the visual and the smell, and then the here as the auditory, as Beverly spoke of, the constant calls for prayer. And it's a nation of a very small area, island, and I think there's over 8,000 mosques in that small area. And so the way they do it is, if you can't be within hearing distance of a mosque, then they need to build another one. And so all of these mosques are constantly with their loudspeakers, pumping out the calls to prayer 4 or 5 times a day, different ones at different times. And so it was just a multi-sensory kind of overload that you're just, the heat, the smell, the sounds, the visual just kind of overwhelmed you for what you're used to as an isolationist kind of nation that we are.
Do you want to say any more? Do you guys want rice for lunch?
We're good.
Rice every meal. It's pretty ubiquitous. I think I ate more rice in the week I was there than I had for the past 3 years. But anyone want durian, or you want to talk about durian? Yeah. Anyway, do you want to share something? Okay. Let's move on to the mission at Soli. And we talked about the CMA it wants to go those hard and those dark places. Why don't you tell us how you witnessed that Soli Island is a hard and a dark place? Why don't you tell us some of those things?
So SGAC, thank you so much. Thank you that you trusted us and given us the amazing opportunity to go to Soli to
Put that on your
support.
tonsils. Put that on your tonsils.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
I'm sorry. To support and alongside A&J. Thank you so much for the opportunity, for all your prayers and donations. A&J is thankful for the money you raise, and they will be able to pay for 2 years for the ESL Center. Thank you for your generosity.
Yeah.
As far as the mission, I was really grateful to have some cultural training before we even went on our trip. But in saying that, it did not prepare me for what I felt and witnessed when my feet hit the ground. I was nervous. I was afraid I was going to say the wrong thing. Would someone overhear me? Were we being watched? What if they stop us at the airport and ask us why we're there? It was a little unnerving. And I was afraid I'd get our IWs in trouble. But when we got there, right away, A&J, we had a debrief and we talked about a lot of things which made us feel a lot better. I really did feel sad in the beginning, not being able to pray out loud or sing out loud or have worship service. We had to be so careful. We were with our IWs every day, and they live it every day for 20-some years. When we were all together worshiping one Sunday morning, we were all sitting very, very quiet, whispering, trying to sing, and we saw this shadow walk by the back door. I tell you what, silence fell fast and hard. It was a little unnerving. Thankfully, it turned out to be just a family member, but we felt that sadness and that scariness for just a second. We spent many hours together in the community, getting to know each other, laughing and chatting. I think our nerves lightened a little bit. This is the support that we could bring them, just to be with them. As the early angst diminished, was the opportunity for us to work in the English Center with the kids. To have them welcome us, strange white people from snowy Canada, it was quite emotional and the best opportunity of all. To help them with their exercises in their class, writing and pronunciation. I could have stayed in that school every day. They are young, smart, and little sponges soaking up the opportunities of what the English language will bring them. And even through the support of our church family, it's all because of all the work our IWs do all over the world.
Just for the record, the English Center that you supported is a way that it's a means that they use to get creative access into the country and build relationships with the people. And so we talk about hard in a dark place. This English Center, everyone in the world, if you don't know, if you've never left Canada, wants to learn English. It gets them ahead in life. And so this is a felt need that they provide to the community that helps them provide legitimacy to their international work.
I just wanted to share that going there and having my feet on the ground and being welcome into A&J's home, it gave me a heart for what they were doing and what they've done for 22 years. But what struck me the most is in our conversations throughout the week, they mentioned that there was almost a 10-year period where they had no teammates on the ground. It hit my heart really hard to just imagine how I would feel isolated in a land where I couldn't be surrounded by community, where I couldn't openly worship, and I had nobody else to turn to except for my own family. So the strength and the reliance that they had on God it just hit me so hard, because they are truly serving in a hard and dark place where they, for 10 years, almost half of their time there, had no teammates. And their perseverance and their strength to rely that this is God's calling in their life and this is where they are supposed to be, and to persevere and move forward with their endeavors in the English language school, shows that God will really use people in the hard and dark places if we have the eyes, the ears, and the heart to say, where do you want me, God? Where do you want me to serve? And if this is the place, then I will happily serve.
Jay.
You know, I found it interesting. I've been on many trips such as this, but never been to a hard and dark place. So this was a challenge for me. I was given the task to preach a sermon on Sunday morning. Now, A&J meet with some friends once a month, and they have a bit of a worship service in their home. But because of the Muslim faith, we had to pray quietly, or pray with our eyes open, not closed, and sing quietly. And I was tasked to preach a sermon. No problem. I was a pastor for many years. I preached hundreds of sermons. But this was one of the hardest ones I've ever preached. For you see, I could not say the words mission. I couldn't say the word church. I couldn't declare that Jesus was the Son of God, for fear that someone from the Muslim faith might hear it and have things destroyed for the work that's going on at the English Center. We were at the English Center one afternoon, and I was looking at my sermon, and I was making some changes to it. And I saw a page I didn't like, so I crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage at the English Center. Only to realize that this was a bad mistake. Because had the wrong person found that and opened it and read it, it could likely shut down the English Center entirely, because they saw what was going on outside of their circle. Preaching in a hard and dark place presented many, many challenges.
I think one of the personal kind of realizations that I had there was, as we talked about, it's almost a covert mission that you have to have there. It's something where you can't overtly declare the gospel. You can't overtly say certain words. And so when we talk about creative access, it's also a creative way of sharing the gospel, shining the light. And I think, I couldn't tell you what the stats are, but every person to come to a saving knowledge of Christ needs a certain number of spiritual touches, whether it's 7 or 12 or whatever. And to be that realization that, okay, maybe I'm touch number 3 and 4 or 6 and 7, but I may never see that person come to a saving knowledge of Christ, was something that you have to have that perseverance, that you may not see the final harvest, but you still have that commitment to being part of the journey. And just to kind of have that realization that we don't have in North America at all is, at one point they had several other of their teammates that were getting deported from the country for various reasons that the government would say, no, you're clearly not here to do a business, you're here for nefarious reasons, which would be evangelistic. And so at one point, A&J had that same concern. They're like, well, if all of our friends, all of our teammates are being deported, and so they had to rush home, they were shredding documents, they were destroying hard drives, driving to different dumpsters throughout the city to drop certain things off so it couldn't be discovered. And that's something we have no concept of. Like, to be able to just freely come in this church, raise our hands and say, Jesus, you're Lord, that's a privilege. And that's something that the majority of the world doesn't have. And it was just that realization that we are so blessed. And sometimes we squander it, but we are so blessed to have that freedom to be able to worship God.
Yeah. I mean, you heard that, like about 17, 18 believers before, about a month or two before they got there, were deported off this island. And then A&J started shredding documents, and just because they didn't want any evidence that they are Christian, so that they can continue the Christian work there. It's just this weird dynamic that they have to live in, and they're seeing fruit for the ministry. Beverly, did you want to share something?
Then we were in Thailand. Wow. What an amazing experience in Thailand. Do you see how loud I am?
No, we're going to get to Thailand in a minute here. You don't hit that yet, but No, we're not at the global gathering, but can you talk a little about what you actually did on site with them, with the English Center? Just briefly, share a few words.
Sure. A&J had created a schedule for us, and our intent to go there was to assist with the English language school and to facilitate a Saturday kids club and to preach the service on Sunday with the people who were able to attend in their home. And overall, our mission was to help in the English language school. We also did a prayer tour going around to the mosques in the area, learning what the culture and the religion did and what the expectations were. But one quick story, if I may. The Sunday Kids Club was something that they had tried before Christmas and got registrations. There were 12 children registered, and the day of, only 6 showed up. And so we weren't sure if it was going to be a huge success, but they advertised it as Canadians were coming, it's going to be fun. And it was, because we were there. But when the registrations started coming in, we were planning on 12. And then we would get notifications the week before. It's up to 14. It's up to 16. It's up to 18. It's up to 20. And we thought, we planned for 12. What are we going to do? But when we went there on that Saturday, and 18 out of the 20 kids showed up, it was such an amazing opportunity to pour into their lives that we couldn't have imagined. And the joy in sharing what we live in Canada, it gave us an appreciation for our Canada as well as the land that they live in.
One other thing that's really fantastic was they do this, I don't know if it's once a month or more, but it's a coffee conversation. And so they meet at a local coffee shop and they just talk with people trying to teach them English. And they put up a sign advertised in their school, and then whoever else is sitting around the coffee shop, they just say, come, sit with us and talk. And so it happened where there was a couple young people sitting around and just came into our conversation. And we sat in groups for a couple hours. We just talked, helping them to learn English. And it's a way for them to advertise the school, but it's also a way for them to invest in their lives. What a treat it was to just spend time with the local people and hear their stories, to ask them questions about food and traditions, and they would ask about our traditions and food. And I really see this as an investment into the future of the school, seeing it develop into having even more students.
Yeah. Rob, maybe you want to talk about this, but our church sent them with a gift, if you don't know, $11,200 that you guys gave to give them as a gift to support the English Center that they're talking about. Why don't you talk about how significant that's going to be for them moving forward?
Yeah, you bet. So part of the creative access they have is they have a legitimate business, and it's the English school, as we spoke about. So the way they are set up is, if you think about a strip mall, and they're just one of the many buildings in there. But what the difference is this is, from the parents' perspective, their opportunity to get their kids ahead, to get them knowing that global language, as they call it, being English. And so for the gift that we as a church were able to give, that basically provides their rent for 2 years. It provides the salaries for the teachers there for 2 years. And something that they've never, ever been able to have, that, okay, we have our feet under us, we can get this going, we have 2 more years ahead. And so, that's a huge praise God that, personally, having seen it, and from A&J's perspective, we want to really thank you for that amazing gift that we have put them forward 2 years from where they were previously. So, that's amazing.
Thank you. And you also had a significant impact relationally with A&J. They deeply felt encouraged. Anyone want to talk about that? How they deeply felt encouraged by you just being there? Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
try not to cry.
You're going to cry, okay.
One thing that impacted me, and I was going to share it later, but I'll share it now, is that A&J had been there for 22 years, and we were, in our discussions, found out that we were the first team that were non-pastoral to come and pour into their ministry and into their lives. And I feel that I didn't realize how much of a spiritual drought that you live in when you're the only one pouring into each other as a husband and wife and a family. And so our contribution was more than just working in the English language tool. I felt that we were called to go there to pour into them and to validate them and to let them know that we see them and we see the work they've done and we see the sacrifices they've made, and that they are valued by us as a team, by us as a congregation, and that they are doing God's work, and that is valuable.
Well said, Camille. Oh, Jay.
We want to bless them, and we were way more blessed than they were blessed.
Yeah.
They treated us so well. They blessed us and treated us and fed us and entertained us and worked with us. And we kept trying to be a blessing to them, and they would just bless us instead. You know, so we couldn't win. They were just blessed to have us with them. And we were so blessed to be a part of their home. We were in their home so much. We stayed in a hotel, for lack of better words, right next to their house. But we were in their home so much, it felt like we were living there. They were so generous to us and fed us and treated us with the utmost. It was a beautiful thing. It really was.
And Eric and I sat down with A&J in Thailand when they were at the assembly, and they were moved to tears by your work. So A&J are going to come home on home assignment starting this summer, and so we're going to have them right here. It won't be online, but you'll get to pour into them as well. They're going to be home for a whole year, and we're going to get them one Sunday probably this fall. I don't know which one yet, but let's talk about, let's move the discussion to the third and final one, where we can't go on a trip like this without being impacted in your whole spirit, and you're just drinking from a fire hose. Every single sense of yours is going off all the time. You take what you experienced on Soli Island and then even the Global Assembly, and Eric and I might pipe in with the Global Assembly. What have you learned? How has this changed you? How has this, shall I say, maybe even wrecked you for the good moving forward?
I think going to a hard, dark place truly did wreck me. There were times that I was speechless. There were times where I was emotionally drained, and there were times that brought me to tears. Watching the people of this island just made me ask about my commitment to Christ. You see, Muslims pray 5 times a day. Do I pray more than once a day? Muslims care for the needy. What do I do for the needy? Muslims live with very little, yet they give so much to their places of worship. Is my small tithe anything in comparison to what they give? This trip has challenged me to think about my faith in North America. It's forced me to ask some difficult questions as to why I do the way I live. And I ask myself, do I need to be more committed to living sold out for Christ?
Corey, what do you think?
If you don't know it, God is moving in the world like never before. I saw it firsthand at worship service every morning at Global Gathering. The opportunity of His children to sing their hearts out and praise God like never before without suppression. They were freed. Through various sessions during the week, I learned of an organization started called Strawberry Girls. Help for migrant workers, young women and girls from Morocco who just want to make a living but are being sex trafficked in Spain. God is working. In January of 25, laws have changed. There are now contracts, better wages, and more regulations to help these young women. God is working. I'm so grateful to God for giving me the opportunity to go on this mission trip and attend the Global Gathering. The two opportunities worked hand in hand. On Soli, I learned how important building relationships are, regardless of culture or where we come from or our background. We are all people first. God wanted me to experience this. Global Gathering gave me the perspective of global awareness. God is moving in the world through our IWs and through us as we support them. I need to be a better disciple of God. I need to dedicate more time with him through my prayer life. But I promise it's not going to be over the loudspeakers at 4:30 a.m. The daily call to prayer starts early on Soli, which wakes the neighborhood rooster, who woke the neighborhood cat. Whether it's another mission trip for me, global support of our IWs, or in my own community, I'm not sure yet, but I know he's working in my heart. I wrote in my journal almost every day on my journey, and as I look back over some of the things I wrote, I'll share the scripture with you that I wrote early on, Joshua 1:9. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. If mission is on your heart or you're even thinking about it, you need to do it. God needs you to help our IWs.
Wow. Wow. Beverly, you want to share?
No, I'm afraid.
You're afraid?
In a good way. So this was refreshing, the global gathering that we gathered in Thailand. And it was refreshing and wonderful as we had praise and worship every morning. Heard the preaching of the word.
Put the microphone up.
We heard from our IWs around the globe and about what God was doing in that part of the world. I even got a chance to meet some of the IWs we prayed for every Monday morning in ladies' prayer meeting. That was amazing for me. After coming from Soli Island and allowed to worship, we were allowed to worship the Lord out loud, even in someone's home, you weren't allowed to worship the Lord out loud. So we were really happy to worship the Lord in the global conference. And I had the opportunity also to worship God and open my mouth and worship him loudly. It was such a relief for me. I was grateful and thankful to all for the atmosphere of praise and worship to God. Can't read my own writing.
Can't read your own writing, eh? You're so
and-
excited. You were so excited in Thailand. I can see her. Usually you see her worship here, but you should have seen her worship in Thailand.
Really, which was priceless and something I will never ever take for granted. My life was changed forever. I want to evangelize more.
Yeah, good.
In my country and in my world and in my family and in my community. Thank you.
Camille. Yeah.
The question is, how has this impacted your soul? Well, I thought jet lag was a bad thing, but looking back at the last week, when I would wake up wide awake at 3:30 in the morning, it was such a sweet time for God to work in my heart and do devotions. So how has he moved in my heart? Mark 10:45 says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." And I've heard others say that when they went on a missions trip, it wasn't the people that they were serving that were blessed, but themselves, that you came back changed. And so how have I been changed? God is stirring things up in my heart and in our hearts. He has brought people into our lives over the last 3 weeks. He's orchestrated such sweet conversations and deep conversations that we couldn't have anticipated. And he's asking us to let him move in our lives. And what will that look like? I can't say. But am I changed? Absolutely. I feel a sense of joy and anticipation in what will come if we allow God to lead us and to guide us into his next chapter. So I know that I've been created to serve. It's my heart. I love to do it. But I serve within the context of my own parameters. That hit hard. I serve within what I can control. But what if I served within God's parameters? And how much more could he do through me when I let him reign in all areas of my life? So I'm learning that Isaiah's cleansing and calling from the Lord in chapter 6 might be what he's asking us. Whom shall I send as a messenger to my people, and who will go for us? And I ask myself, do I have the courage to say, here I am, Lord, send me?
I think some of the most impactful things for me was after spending 2 weeks on Soli Island, where everything's a whisper and you have to use code words to refer to certain things that you're talking about, and very almost suppressing inwardly how you can outwardly express, if you know what I mean. So after 2 weeks of that, we arrive at Global Gathering, and we have this first worship service, and it's single guitar, a little PowerPoint, no drums, no smokes, no light. It was just a singer and a guitar, and everyone in the room, all 350, hands in the air, just weeping. And I realized I was only in Soli for a cup of tea. Like, I was there for 2 weeks, but our IWs live this day in, day out in the hard and dark places. And for them, they're in an arid desert of not being able to worship, not being able to praise. And then we get here to the Global Gathering, and it's a fire hose of emotion. Just, I can finally worship, I can finally praise God. And even myself, 2 weeks only in Soli, I was like, oh, it's like a cup of cold water amongst an arid place. Yeah. And I think it was just such a realization that that's not how we live. We come Sunday and we complain that it's too loud or too soft or the wrong songs, and how can they do this? And why was the guy wearing jeans on stage? And I can't believe that. And that's not reality. That's not what the world lives. And before I start preaching, I think the biggest thing for me was like, okay, it's a privilege to worship God, but it's who we're created to be. And allergies, sorry, there's...
Second winter allergies.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that I learned most from the conference, is that these hard and dark places made me love what we're doing as a denomination. This is the tip of the spear. Yeah. This is where we need to be. And one of the things they spoke about is that it's not the IWs bringing God, bringing Jesus to these dark places. God's there. Jesus is there. And we're going to shine that light and show the amazing gift that we take for granted, but that these least reached people groups have no idea about. Yeah. And to echo what Brent said, it wrecked me. It totally wrecked me. And honestly, I have to fight the bitterness of what we every day see as something that we just take for granted. 2 seconds into driving on the Henday, I was annoyed that somebody cut me off, and I can't believe they're driving slow in the left lane, and this is so disgraceful. And I'm like, what am I doing? This is how we live. This is not how we should be living. So it was a total kind of reset for me to see the world as God sees it.
Yeah. Can I get...
I think for me, the most impactful moments were surrounding also the location, but also the worship time. We're going to hear that over and over probably from us. I think there's something about being displaced when you're worshiping. I wasn't in the comfort of my North American church with all the things surrounding me, all the people surrounding me that I know support me. Being in Thailand, where it's 94% Buddhist and 5% Hindu, only about 1% Christian, was quite impactful for me. And so to stand in that room and worship with all the IWs and all the pastors and lay people in that room, the ones with the red lanyards from the hard and dark places, was so impactful. There was just no words to describe that. Singing songs like Worthy of It All and Gratitude, and just seeing people pour their hearts out because this is their time. That's the time they had to do it. I think that was the most impactful for me.
Awesome. Eric and I were also able to sit down that week with every single one of our IWs that we support at SGAC. So the way that CMA works is we give to the Global Advance Fund. If you give to support missions, you give to the Global Advance Fund a big pot in Canada, and then they pay the 200 IWs from there. But then they cluster up certain IWs that are from this kind of Edmonton West area that are part of this church, and they connect with us when they're on home assignment. So we never in history have all 4 or 5 of them been in the exact same place. And so we had meals with them, sat down for 2 hours with them and just chatted with them, heard their heart, heard about all these stories. 3 couples are coming home on home assignment. A&J is one of them next year. So we're going to put them on stage here, and you're going to hear more stories about that. So, but for Eric and I think Camille and Rob were there for a few conversations as well. Just to hear some of the stories and encourage them and pray for them was just absolutely amazing. Let's wrap it up, and let's have Jay. Jay is the team leader here. If you were, and they've talked about this, and we had hours of discussion in Thailand. If you could summarize all that you've learned and experienced and tell SGAC one thing, what would it be? And this is the team speaking, and Jay's the leader, and so.
This is new for us. This global gathering is the first time it's ever happened. And what an experience it was for us. We want to thank you so much for allowing us to attend that event. I want to say we left educated, encouraged, and excited about being a part of the Christian Missionary Alliance. I believe that I can speak for all of you, for all of us, by saying this word: wow, what an experience. There is so much I can tell you, but let me just summarize it with one thing. We are educated about the focus of the CMA. We are educated about the idea of what we're all about. And Rob made this note for us to remember. Missionary is our middle name. We need to own that name. We think about what's going on, how exciting it is right now. All the global work that's going on in the hard and the dark places. And while on one hand it's very scary, it's also very exciting. We learned that from many of our international workers, or our missionaries as we call them, that there are many ways to serve the people of this part of the world. And I'm certain over the next few weeks, next months, next years, you're going to hear about some of the ministries that pulled on our heartstrings as we heard these stories. We also learned that there's a great need for people to join the team as international workers. Some of our workers are retiring, and there's a huge gap that needs to be filled. And maybe God's calling one of you to become a servant overseas. But I know right away you're going to say, but I'm not a missionary. Guess what? We're all missionaries. Every one of us. And serving overseas in the CMA is neat because you can serve in 3 different packages. You can work in the traditional church development. You can serve in social relief and developments. Or you could serve like A&J in the marketplace ministry. Maybe God is calling you to serve from overseas. And if that's the case, I encourage you to prayerfully consider how you can serve in the CMA.
All right, thanks. Can we just thank them for sharing?
Thanks for listening to this week's message from Spruce Grove Alliance Church. For more information or to hear past messages, please visit sgac.net.